Hello and welcome to the ScatterVolt channel, and today let me show you what are the best and worst mid-range graphics cards you can get in 2023 through the means of a tier list. I think many of you guys are looking forward to this video because in this video we're going to be covering a whole wide array of graphics cards from $200 all the way up to $500. So I think a lot of you may be looking either for a new graphics card upgrade or just looking to center your next gaming PC around one of these graphics cards. So in this video, I'll be telling you which ones I recommend and which ones you should really stay away from. Now, yes, I'm aware the RX 7600 XT, 7700 XT, 7500, RTX 4060, RTX 4050, and RTX 4060 Ti are on the way, but I'm gonna wait to update this video once all of those new graphics cards come out. So for the moment, this will be graded off of current PC gaming needs in the mid-year of 2023. So that's what we'll be basing this tier list off of from all the AMD, nvidia, and Intel graphics cards we'll be covering. So with that, every single graphics card I mentioned throughout this video can be found in the description below if any of them interest you, but obviously stay to the good ones and don't click on the bad ones. So we're gonna get right into the tier list video, but first, a quick word from our sponsor. This here is the LG Gram, and let me show you why this is one of the few laptops that blend that perfect mix of power and portability. As a content creator and gamer, I've been on a helpless search in trying to find a laptop that is razor thin, versatile, and powerful enough for my everyday needs. And so far, the LG Gram has come the closest in meeting the high bars that I've set for it. For starters, it sports a 12th gen i7 1260p processor, mobile RTX 2050 graphics, and combine all of that horsepower with its 17-inch 2560 by 1600 IPS display with all of the color certifications you'd want. And on paper, the LG Gram should satisfy the needs of nearly every PC user, whether if you're an aspiring artist, a gamer, a heavy PC user, or a content creator. And keep in mind, the LG Gram clocks in at a weight of 3 pounds with a thickness of only 0.7 inches. However, specifications are one thing, but real-world performance is another. And fortunately, I've had plenty of time to test out and demo the LG Gram, and I can say with confidence that this laptop exceeded my expectations. When it comes to gaming, the LG Gram actually runs games better than you think, despite the higher resolution display, thanks to the available performance features found with the RTX 2050 and the total 12 cores you get in that i7 1260p processor. And then for creative workloads, I can quite literally take the footage that's being recorded right now from this camera, drag it right onto my DaVinci timeline without any file conversion beforehand, even if it's H.265 compressed footage at 4K like what you're seeing right now. And that is all thanks to the Intel QuickSync decoder found in the i7 in the LG Gram. So the LG Gram has the specs, it has the design, and it has the power to fit pretty much the needs of any PC user who wants unlimited capabilities and a design-restricted laptop that is actually practical and portable. So if the LG Gram interests you, then I highly recommend you check out the link at the top of the description. So we're gonna start things off with the cheapest graphics cards and then move our way up in price, which leads us with the RX 6600. Now, I'm a fan of this graphics card. It really helped us for many budget PC gamers who are looking at a fairly affordable graphics card that could deliver some pretty solid 1080p gaming performance with an 8GB VRAM buffer for a fairly inexpensive price. And currently, it's selling for about $220 on Amazon and just at $200 on Newegg, which is actually a really good price because I think it recently received a price cut, maybe because there's some competition in its price range, but enough on that. I think the RX 6600 1 year ago would have gotten an S tier from me, but actually right now, I'm gonna give it an A tier. Reason being, I think there's another graphics card within its price range that is more desirable in terms of performance and overall features, and the RX 6600, all things taken for granted, does have slightly kind of weak memory. I mean, yes, it is 8GB of VRAM, but its memory bus width is only 128 bits, so kind of small. So even though this can run on PCI Gen 3.0 systems, if you want the most amount of performance, not run into any memory bandwidth issues, you're gonna want to run on PCI Gen 4.0. Still though, not a bad graphics card by any means, and actually very much worth its dollar. A tier by no means is bad at all. It's just not quite perfection. Which leads us to our next choice, which probably is the reason why the RX 6600 went on a recent price cut, the Intel Arc A750. This graphics card I recently tried out in a $700 PC build guide video, and I had a fantastic experience with it. The performance while I was gaming and using it was no different than using an nvidia or AMD graphics card. In fact, the only negative aspect I didn't like about the A750 was that sometimes in the graphics card software itself, that'd be the Intel Arc software, after recording and then starting up recording again on like 6 different games, the software eventually like blacked out. Like the screen just had a black box instead of the actual Arc software, which meant I had to restart the software, but that was just about the only negative experience I had with the A750. The actual performance is really good. And versus the 6600, it is about $30 more expensive at $250, but it's got better memory in it. Yes, it's 8 gigabytes of VRAM, but it has a 256-bit memory bus, so bigger, which means more memory bandwidth, which would explain why the A750 beats the RX 6600 when it comes to higher resolution gaming in say 1440p and 4K gaming. And to compound on top of all of that, this graphics card supports the AV1 encoder and decoder, which finally now has support for live streaming on YouTube through OBS. So if you wanted to live stream at a very high quality, but with a low amount of internet bandwidth, then the AV1 codec is finally here. And given the potential performance ceiling the A750 could hit with future driver updates, as those Arc graphics cards are continually getting to get better, I think all things considered, even with slightly glitchy graphics card software, I'm putting it in S tier. I think it's going to age very well. If the graphics card driver updates for the A750 continue on the trajectory they've had, you're getting some pretty solid specifications for $250, and then AV1 codec is finally actually starting to show its worth. So for $250, it's a damn good graphics card. S tier for me. And this positive mood is then going to shift to a more realistic mood, and that is the RTX 3050. This is NVIDIA's second worst budget graphics card, if you even call it budget, graphics card they've ever released. The 3050 had an MSRP of $250, which was already kind of a jump up, and in my opinion, this never should have been an RTX card. You don't buy a 3050 for ray tracing. It's meant to be the spiritual successor to the GTX 1660 Super, so it really should be like a 1770 Super, if you can call it that. But it's not a fantastic graphics card. At its price, it gets beaten out by the RX 6650 XT, because right now the cheapest 3050 you can find is about 280 bucks. So it still isn't at MSRP almost a year and a half later. And here's the funny bit. You can use the DLSS argument all you want with the 3050, but the fact is, with DLSS, with the 3050, it's still gonna be behind a 6650 XT in terms of just regular performance with no upscaling added onto that AMD card. So no amount of DLSS can save the performance of this underwhelming graphics card, and to compound on top of that, it's 8 gigabytes of VRAM, which, yes, the other cards in this price range have 8, but it's entry level. The A750 has a bigger memory bus. That is gonna age better than the 8 on the 3050, which only has 128 bits for a memory bus. So all in all, don't buy the 3050. It's a very lackluster graphics card. Do not buy it. There are extremely better options than the 3050. I'm not even gonna call I'm gonna rename this to Garbo tier. The 3050 is a very poopy graphics card. Do not get it. Which, by the way, you can use AMD FSR on the 6650 XT to just wipe the floor with the 3050. Which leads us to our next card, the 6650 XT. Now this runs at about $280, and I know I was just giving it a lot of good praise in comparison to the 3050, but in my opinion, it's actually not the best AMD graphics card for value. It's basically an RX 6600 on roids. It has the same memory, that being 8 gigabytes with that 128-bit memory bus, but it has more cores, higher core clock, consumes more wattage, just generally faster. But for only $30 more, you can get the RX 6700 with 10 gigabytes of VRAM and a bigger memory bus. So really, I think you're kind of overpaying slightly for a graphics card with a very basic set of 8 gigabytes of VRAM, which is why I'm gonna give it a B tier. But there is another 8GB graphics card that I don't think a lot of people like to talk about, and that is the Intel Arc A770 with 8GB of VRAM. Now this is a little bit of a confusing graphics card because you can either get this for a really good price, like at my local Micro Center, you can snag one up for $270, which I would absolutely take over a 3050 and over a 6650 XT. Or you can get one online for like $330, which I would not get. So the pricing is a little bit inconsistent. That said though, it's got all the advantages of being an Intel Arc graphics card. So the AV1 codec is at your disposal. You do have that higher quality memory with that 256-bit memory bus. So it is gonna age fairly nicely for higher resolution gaming, despite having that 8GB VRAM buffer, but you get an A770 for that 16GB of VRAM, not for 8, as we'll see later on in this video, but it's still a good graphics card. So I'm going to give it an A tier behind the 6600. If it's for a good price, the 8GB version of the A770 is really good. But otherwise, for a little bit more money, you can get a graphics card with more VRAM, like the RX 6700. So this is our next graphics card. It costs bang on at $300. Comes with 10GB of VRAM with a 160-bit memory bus. So it is going to be faster than the 6600, and it's got just 2 extra gigs of VRAM. So I like this graphics card because it doesn't consume that much more wattage versus the 6650 XT, comes with more VRAM and more memory that's faster, and overall is the faster graphics card. So I think it's a nice step up for only about an extra $30. So I'm gonna give it an A tier behind the 6600. Put on your hazmat suits. Put on your masks. I don't have one, but put it on because it's about to get nasty. So the RTX 3060 you can find for right now at about $330 with 8GB of VRAM, but it's not the same memory as the other 3060 we'll be discussing in this video with 12GB of VRAM. Of course it's smaller, but the memory bus is also smaller. That said though, the core count is still the same and the texture mapping units is also the same between the 8 and 12 gig versions. But it's so close in price to the other graphics cards we're soon gonna be discussing in this video with considerably more VRAM that it's just not worth it. Even in terms of performance, the previous three graphics cards we just discussed, the A770 8GB, 6700, and 6650 XT will outperform the 3060 8GB. Even if you add on DLSS to the 3060, it's still going to be outperformed by an RX 6700 without any FPS upscaling. The 3060 8GB is just, I mean, yes, it's bad, but you shouldn't even consider it. It was released so late in this generation, it's just simply a cash grab from nvidia. Never get the RTX 3060 8GB, never. It's not just bad, you should never consider it, which actually, let's make an appropriate column for this one. The RTX 3060 8GB belongs in landfill tier. It's not good. It's so overpriced, man. Goodness gracious. But let's talk about this next graphics card, the Intel Arc A770. So this has an MSRP of $330, and I think people are starting to get the clue that the A770 with that 16GB of VRAM, with the good memory at that, it's a 256-bit memory bus, it's gonna be pretty fast. I think it's actually gone a little bit up in price because people who know what this graphics card is capable of are starting to grab them up. This is the cheapest graphics card you can get right now, brand new, with that amount of VRAM. And with how much PC games have been coming out lately and just using up tons and tons of VRAM, and with statements coming out from other tech outlets saying that 12GB of VRAM is the new minimum for AAA gaming, here you have the A770 chilling with 16 gigs of VRAM at only $330. And remember, at the end of the day, you're still getting all of the benefits of an ARC graphics card with that AV1 encoder and decoder, which will be better in terms of graphics card, in terms of quality on stream and recordings than say NVENC or AMD's Relive. So all in all, with that 16GB VRAM buffer, knowing where PC games are headed in terms of VRAM usage, and given its price, I'm putting it at the top of A tier. Its performance isn't anything to amaze at, because ultimately it is slower than one of the next graphics cards we're going to be discussing in this video for only about $20 more, but it is faster than the other one by a pretty decent margin. That one being the RTX 3060 12GB. Why this is the #1 selling graphics card on Amazon? I'm losing faith in humanity when I'm losing faith in the PC gaming landscape. Like, the RTX 3060 wasn't a graphics card designed for gamers. Okay, let me give you the gist. This has an MSRP of $330, but still after 2 years is selling for about $350 on Amazon. And there are some aftermarket cards that are selling for at MSRP, but they aren't from any well-known retailers or well-known graphics card makers. And there's a little more weirdness to the 3060 that makes it just uncomfortable to recommend. I know it has that very shiny 12GB VRAM buffer, but I think when this graphics card was originally made, that was an intentional move by nvidia to appeal to cryptocurrency miners at the time. So think about this. The RTX 3060 Mobile has more CUDA cores and more texture mapping units than the RTX 3060 Desktop, which would explain why in certain scenarios that aren't VRAM limited, the 3060 Mobile outperformed the 3060 Desktop, which does not compute. That shouldn't make sense. But yet it has that 12GB VRAM buffer. And why did nvidia decide to put that in a $330 graphics card at the time when the 3070 and 3060 Ti had 8GB of VRAM when they initially released? Why did nvidia all of a sudden put out a graphics card with 12GB of VRAM at $330 in March of 2021? It's because they wanted to give it to cryptocurrency miners to be sold on a large scale, because the more amount of VRAM you have for cryptocurrency mining, the better it'll be. So I think this graphics card was catered towards miners, and now 2 years on, it's just over-bloated for gamers. And as you'll soon see, for the same price, there is a graphics card that is exponentially better than it. Should you get a 3060 for DLSS? No, because if you add DLSS to the 3060, it'll still get beat by the next graphics card we're about to talk about in this video. Should you get a 3060 for ray tracing? Well, not quite, because it doesn't quite have the raw performance to run games at, say, 1440p and ray trace at the same time. It just isn't that powerful. And 3, should you get it for content creation? Because at the end of the day, it has 12 gigs of VRAM and it has CUDA cores. Well, I'm still gonna say no, because I'd ultimately recommend a 2080 Ti used on eBay over that 3060 if you're in that specific case scenario that may need something for content creation. So I'm gonna put it in C tier. Yeah, C tier. I really hope the 3060 drops in price, because please, it's been almost 2 years and needs to be $330. But let's talk about the graphics card that absolutely wipes the floor with it. For the same price of a RTX 3060, which costs $350 right now, you can get a graphics card that had an original MSRP of $480, but is currently selling for $350. Anyone want to guess what that is? If you are watching this video with green shaded glasses, I advise you to skip this portion of the video, because we're going to be covering the RX 6700 XT. This graphics card, for its price, should not exist. At $350, you're getting a graphics card with 12GB of VRAM, the same as the 3060, but with the core performance of that of a 3070. Yeah. And in terms of just raw performance, say versus the 3060, it runs circles around it. Even if you turn on DLSS on the 3060, it's still going to get beat by a 6700 XT. Even if you turn on ray tracing on the 3060, it's still gonna get beat by the 6700 XT, just because it has that much more raw performance. The chip itself is just superior. For $350, I'm not gonna give it an S tier. Nah. No. You don't get it, because the 6700 XT is going in SS tier. All right, enough about that. Let's talk about the 3060 Ti, which I actually have a little bit of a soft spot for. The 3060 Ti was the one graphics card out of the whole RTX 3000 lineup that I recommended for a PC build guide this year, because for the money, it actually performs pretty nicely. It's kind of like a 3070 Lite. It has the same amount of VRAM at 8 gigabytes of VRAM, similar memory, but its performance is not too far off the 3070. And if this video were made a year ago, I would put the 3060 Ti in A tier. It's actually got some decent value for $400, but there's just one problem, and I already mentioned it. It's that it has an 8 gigabyte VRAM buffer, which really hasn't aged well recently as far as AAA PC games go, running at higher graphics quality settings. And that really puts a stain on the 3060 Ti because it's actually pretty good for the money. Actually, yeah, last year I was recommending the 3060 Ti over the 3060 if you needed an nvidia graphics card. But now with the way PC games are going with higher VRAM usage, that 8 gigabytes of VRAM is gonna fill up quick, and that ray tracing lead that the 3060 Ti would have, say over an AMD card, will go away if it runs out of VRAM. So at 400, actually, yeah, it's about 390 bucks brand new. It's still like okay, but that VRAM holds it back. So I gotta put it no higher than B tier, which still I think is the best value NVIDIA card right now for the money. Yeah, we'll leave it at that. But then at $400, we have the RX 6750 XT, and this one's a weird one. Oh my God. Guys, wait, hold up. hold up. I put the 6700 in the wrong tier. I am so sorry. I meant to put this in S tier. What was I thinking? Oh, okay, back to the 6750 XT. This graphics card is a little bit weird because it is faster than a 6700 XT, but it does it at the cost of a lot more power. So yes, you're getting a faster graphics card, but it is probably going to run hotter if you don't have it on a good cooler, which means you'll have to spend more on a graphics card with a better onboard cooler. So its performance is good, just you gotta watch out for the temperatures on this. So I'm gonna put it at A tier. And once again, it has 12 gigabytes of VRAM, not bad by any means for 400 bucks, but there is a graphics card we're soon gonna cover for just a little bit more that has 16 gigabytes of VRAM if you wanted to stick to Radeon. But now let's talk about the last NVIDIA graphics card in this video, that being the RTX 3070. This just clocks in at $500, so it barely made the cut for this video. And it's actually at MSRP now. Finally, after like 2.5 years, it's at MSRP. Unlike the 3050 and the 3060. That said though, just like the 3060 Ti, it unfortunately falls victim to the fact that it has 8 gigabytes of VRAM, which I really don't want to recommend for a graphics card that costs $500 brand new. It would make more sense if you needed an NVIDIA graphics card to just save up for a 4060 with more VRAM, so you wouldn't run into any VRAM issues. But even then, the 3070 doesn't have much going for it, especially versus the competition. So for that, I'm going to give it a C tier ahead of the 3060 12 gigabyte, because it's still a 3070. But if you run into any VRAM limited situations, then you're kind of screwed. Which then leads us to our final graphics card, coming in at about $480, the Radeon RX 6800. Now, unlike the 3070, this is not gonna run into any VRAM issues whatsoever. It's got 16 gigabytes of VRAM. That should be plenty for now and for a few years into the future. In terms of raw performance, for its price, it totally smokes the 3070. And at that too, in VRAM limited scenarios, it has a fairly sizable lead over the 3070, even if you turn on ray tracing. If you don't believe me, go ahead and watch some of Hardware Unboxed's most latest videos covering the 6800 versus the 3070 in recent 2023 PC games, and you'll see that the 6800 for less makes more sense than the 3070, even if you turn on ray tracing. And another cool thing about the RX 6800 is that it doesn't consume that much wattage. It's actually just a little bit more than the 6700 XT and less than the 6750 XT. However though, I'm not going to give it anything crazy in terms of a recommendation because there is the RX 6800 XT for only about 40 to 50 bucks more, and that I think is more worth it over the 6800. Yes, it uses more power, but it's basically a 3080 for way less than what a 3080 would cost right now brand new. So for that, I'm gonna give it an S tier rating, but near the end. Okay, there you have it. This is my ranking of the best mid-range graphics cards you can get right now in mid-2023. I'll inevitably have to update this video later on this year when the 7600 XT, 4060, 4060 Ti, 4050, 7700 XT, 7500 eventually come out. but that isn't gonna be for a while. So I think this ranking here will be fairly up to date. So that is it for this video. Thank you so much for watching. And if you enjoyed what you've seen so far, consider subscribing. And with all that said, this is the ScatterVolt channel signing out.